The useless wife shouldn't sit at the head of the table, Isabel said softly as she lifted her wine glass beneath the chandelier, and nobody in the dining room defended me. The words drifted through Harrison Manor as gently as smoke, but they landed harder than any insult I had heard in my 70 years of life. The long oak table stretched beneath pools of golden light, while crystal glasses reflected against the dark windows overlooking the snowy Connecticut grounds. Harrison sat silently at the far end of the room in his worn denim jacket, looking completely out of place among the polished silver and old money elegance. Most people in this family treated him like a ghost, a disgraced outsider, a man who had vanished 20 years ago and returned only after the death of William Harrison changed the balance of everything. But I noticed something the others didn't. Every time Harrison entered the room, Thomas stopped talking. Every time Harrison looked toward the fireplace, Victoria's fingers tightened around her napkin. And every single time Isabel poured wine for David, she checked to make sure Harrison wasn't watching her. Eleanor probably doesn't even understand half the business discussions at this table. Isabel continued with a graceful smile that never quite reached her eyes. David lowered his gaze toward his plate without saying a word. My son had inherited the Harrison face, but none of the strength that once built this family empire. The pressure had hollowed him out slowly over the years. Ethan sat near the staircase, quietly studying everyone the way intelligent young men do when they realize adults are lying to each other. James moved silently beside the fireplace, refilling water glasses with the careful precision only loyal servants possess after decades inside wealthy homes. Outside, snow drifted across the massive front lawn while wine brushed softly against the tall dining room windows. Harrison finally lifted his eyes toward me from the far end of the table. His silver hair looked uneven, almost carelessly cut, and deep lines marked his tired face. But there was nothing weak in his expression. Not fear, not shame, only patience. Isabel laughed lightly and rested her hand against David's arm. Some people survive in this family simply because nobody notices them. I folded my napkin carefully onto my lap and smiled in return. After 35 years inside Harrison Manor, I had learned that the most dangerous people were never the loudest ones at the table, and none of them realized that hidden beneath this house was a secret powerful enough to destroy the Harrison family forever. The dinner ended the way most evenings ended inside Harrison Manor, with silence spreading through the hallways faster than conversation ever could. James cleared the crystal glasses one by one while Isabel disappeared upstairs beside David, her heels tapping softly against the marble staircase until the sound faded into the second-floor corridor. Ethan lingered near the fireplace pretending to scroll through his phone, but I could feel him watching me carefully. Young people often believe older women do not notice anything. That misunderstanding had protected me for years. I remained seated beneath the chandelier long after everyone else left the dining room. The grandfather clock near the library chimed 10 times while snow continued falling beyond the tall windows. Harrison had vanished quietly during dessert without saying goodnight to anyone. That alone unsettled Victoria more than she wanted to admit. She stood near the doorway adjusting the sleeve of her dark silk blouse, pretending to supervise James while her eyes drifted repeatedly toward the west wing of the mansion. Nobody used the west wing anymore. At least that was the story repeated inside this family for nearly 2 decades. "You should get some rest, Eleanor," Victoria finally said in her cold, measured voice. "Stress is not good at your age." I smiled faintly and folded my hands together. Neither are secrets. Her expression barely changed, but I noticed the pause before she answered. Tiny moments like that mattered inside houses like this. The wealthy survived through control, and control often slipped inside silence before it collapsed in public. Victoria turned away without replying. Upstairs, I moved slowly through the dim hallway, lined with oil portraits of dead Harrison men who had built railroads, banks, and shipping companies generations ago. Every painting carried the same expression, pride mixed with warning. Harrison Manor had always felt less like a home and more like a monument designed to remind everyone who held power. My bedroom overlooked the frozen gardens behind the estate, where marble statues disappeared beneath layers of snow each winter. I sat beside the window and stared toward the detached carriage house near the tree line. A single light glowed faintly inside. Harrison was awake. I knew because I had placed the key there myself 3 nights earlier after everyone went to bed. Ethan's voice suddenly interrupted my thoughts from the hallway outside my door. "Grandma?" he asked quietly before stepping inside. His dark sweater was wrinkled, and exhaustion sat heavily beneath his eyes. "Do you trust Harrison?" Most people in this family feared asking direct questions. Ethan had inherited curiosity instead of caution. I looked toward the snowy grounds again before answering. "Trust is dangerous in this house," I said softly. "But fear is much more expensive." Ethan frowned slightly. "Everybody acts strange when he is around." I rested my hand against the old brass key hidden inside my cardigan pocket. "That is because Harrison remembers things the rest of this family buried a very long time ago." The next morning, Harrison Manor looked beautiful in the way expensive things often do when nobody inside them is happy. Snow covered the stone fountain in the front courtyard, while pale winter sunlight filtered through the tall dining room windows, turning the crystal chandelier into scattered gold across the polished oak table. James moved quietly through the breakfast room, preparing coffee exactly the way he had every morning for nearly 40 years. Some routines survive even when families do not. I arrived downstairs just before 8 and found Ethan already sitting near the fireplace with a laptop open in front of him. He looked tired. Curious minds rarely sleep well inside houses full of secrets. "You are up early," I said gently as I poured coffee into my porcelain cup. Ethan rubbed his jaw and glanced toward the hallway before lowering his voice. "I checked the family archives online last night." My hand paused slightly above the cream pitcher. "And there is almost nothing about Harrison before 1998. It is like he disappeared." I sat across from him slowly. "Some disappearances are intentional." Ethan leaned forward. "Grandma, everybody says he ruined the company. But there are no records. No lawsuits. No articles. Nothing." Before I could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. Isabel entered first, wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that matched the polished elegance she carefully maintained at all times. David followed behind her, looking exhausted despite the early hour. His tie hung loose around his collar, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Financial pressure had been eating away at him for years now. Isabel kissed his cheek lightly before noticing Ethan's open laptop. "Working already?" she asked with an easy smile. Ethan closed the screen halfway. "Just researching family history." The room changed immediately. It was subtle, but I saw it. Isabel's posture stiffened for half a second. David looked toward the fireplace instead of at his son. Even James slowed while placing breakfast plates onto the table. "Family history can be misleading," Isabel replied calmly while pouring herself coffee. "People romanticize the past when they should focus on the future." Ethan studied her carefully. "So what really happened to Harrison?" Isabel smiled again, but this time the warmth disappeared entirely. "A man who wastes opportunities eventually becomes irrelevant." At that exact moment, Harrison himself appeared in the doorway wearing the same faded denim jacket from the night before. Snow still clung lightly to the shoulders as though he had already been outside for hours. Nobody spoke. Harrison looked directly at Isabel first, then at David, before his eyes finally settled on Ethan. "That depends," he said quietly in his rough, weathered voice. "Sometimes the people called irrelevant are simply the ones who know where the bodies are buried." The room fell completely still. Even the fire cracking beside the stone hearth suddenly sounded too loud. Isabel set down her coffee cup with controlled precision, but I noticed the slight tremor in her fingers. And for the first time in years, I realized something important. Harrison had not returned to Harrison Manor because he was desperate. He had returned because someone inside this house had become desperate enough to fear him. The tension from breakfast lingered through the rest of the morning like smoke trapped inside old curtains. Harrison Manor had always been a house where people smiled politely while hiding entire wars behind their eyes. By noon, snow had stopped falling, leaving the estate buried beneath a cold white silence that made every sound inside the mansion feel sharper. I found James polishing silver in the butler's pantry beside the kitchen, his sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows while soft jazz played from a small radio near the sink. He had worked for the Harrison family since before David was born, long enough to understand that loyalty and survival were not always the same thing. "You look troubled," I said quietly while stepping into the room. James continued polishing without looking up. "This house has looked troubled for years, Mrs. Harrison." I noticed the old scar near his wrist as he folded the polishing cloth carefully beside the tray. Small details stay with you when you spend decades observing people instead of speaking over them. Harrison frightened them this morning, I said. James finally raised his eyes toward me. No, ma'am. What frightens them is what he remembers. Before I could answer, voices echoed faintly from the hallway outside the study. Isabel and Thomas. Instinct made both James and me fall silent immediately. The study door remained slightly open, just enough for their words to slip through the corridor in broken fragments. We cannot let Ethan keep digging, Isabel whispered sharply. Thomas sounded more tired than angry. The record should have been destroyed years ago. My chest tightened slowly. Isabel lowered her voice further, but I still caught one sentence clearly. If Harrison tells him the truth about David, everything collapses. Silence followed, then footsteps. James moved instantly toward the pantry entrance while I stepped back into the shadows beside the shelves. Isabel crossed the hallway first, perfectly composed as always, though her jaw looked tighter than usual. Thomas followed behind, carrying a leather folder against his chest. He looked older today, weaker. Fear ages people faster than time ever does. After they disappeared upstairs, James closed the pantry door carefully. You should not involve yourself in this anymore, he said quietly. It stopped being safe a long time ago. I gave a faint smile. Safe people do not survive inside this family. Later that afternoon, I walked alone through the West Wing corridor where dust-covered antique tables no one used anymore. The farther I moved from the main hall, the colder the mansion felt. Harrison stood near the old library window staring toward the frozen gardens outside. He did not turn when I entered. They still blame you for what happened, I said softly. Harrison gave a dry, humorless laugh. Blame is convenient when the truth is expensive. I stepped closer slowly, gripping the brass key hidden inside my cardigan pocket. Thomas mentioned David. Harrison finally looked at me then, and for the first time since his return, I saw something dangerous behind his tired eyes. Not anger, not regret, certainty. David is not the secret they are protecting, he said quietly. David is the secret itself. That night, rain replaced the snow, tapping softly against the tall windows of Harrison Manor like impatient fingers. The weather had shifted suddenly, and with it came the strange heaviness that always settled over this house before something important surfaced. I could feel it even while sitting alone in the small reading room beside the east staircase, pretending to finish a book I had not turned a page of in nearly an hour. Upstairs, doors opened and closed quietly as the family retreated into separate corners of the mansion. Nobody gathered together unless appearances required it anymore. Around 11 o'clock, I heard footsteps descending the back staircase near the kitchen corridor. Slow, careful. I recognized Ethan immediately. He paused when he saw me sitting beneath the lamp beside the fireplace. You are awake late again, I said softly. Ethan hesitated before walking closer. There was tension in his face now, not confusion anymore. Suspicion. I followed Thomas tonight, he admitted quietly. I closed the book carefully on my lap. That was dangerous. He went to the basement archives beneath the wine cellar. My fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the chair. Very few people even remembered those rooms existed. Ethan lowered his voice further. Grandma, there are locked cabinets down there. Old files. Boxes with dates going back 30 years. Rain continued tapping steadily against the windows while firelight flickered across the dark wood walls. And? I asked. Ethan swallowed slowly. I found my father's birth certificate. The room became perfectly still around us. There were two versions. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Somewhere deeper inside the mansion, a grandfather clock chimed softly past midnight. Ethan looked pale beneath the warm lamplight now. One copy listed William Harrison as his father, he whispered. The other did not. I stared into the fireplace while old memories rose quietly through my mind like ghosts finally refusing to stay buried. 36 years earlier, Victoria had returned from a 3-month trip to Europe already pregnant with David. William never asked questions publicly. Wealthy families rarely destroy themselves in public. They bury scandals beneath money, silence, and carefully rehearsed loyalty. Ethan sat across from me slowly. Who was Harrison really? He asked. I looked toward the rain-covered windows before answering. The man your family erased. Ethan frowned. Then why come back now? Before I could respond, the reading room door opened unexpectedly. Sophia stood there holding a leather briefcase against her side, rainwater still clinging lightly to her dark coat. She looked surprised to find us awake. "I apologize for the hour," she said carefully. "Thomas asked me to deliver documents for tomorrow's meeting." Ethan immediately straightened beside the fireplace. Sophia's eyes moved between us briefly before resting on me. "Mrs. Harrison," she said quietly, "there is something inside these files you need to see before the others do." I rose slowly from the chair while thunder rolled faintly outside across the Connecticut hills. Sophia placed the folder carefully onto the table between us. Across the front, written in faded black ink, were 3 words I had not seen in over 3 decades. Paternity confidential records. The storm continued through the night, wrapping Harrison Manor in the kind of darkness that makes old houses feel alive. Rain slid down the tall windows in restless streams, while distant thunder rolled across the hills beyond the estate. Ethan stood beside the reading room table staring at the confidential folder as though opening it might permanently change the shape of his life. The truth often arrives quietly. That is what makes it dangerous. Sophia removed her damp coat slowly and draped it across the back of a chair before looking directly at me. "Thomas never intended for anyone else to see those files," she said carefully. "But he has been moving assets all week. Something is happening tomorrow." Ethan reached toward the folder first, but I placed my hand gently over it. "Not here," I said softly. "Walls inside this house have protected secrets longer than any person living in it." We moved to the West Wing library just after midnight. The room smelled faintly of old paper, cedarwood, and fireplace smoke. Harrison was already there waiting beside the shelves as though he had expected us. A single lamp cast shadows across the deep lines of his face, while rain tapped steadily against the arched windows behind him. Ethan stopped cold when he saw him. "You knew," he whispered. Harrison looked at the folder in my hands, but did not answer immediately. I knew the family would eventually run out of places to hide the truth. Sophia carefully opened the file across the large mahogany desk. Inside were old photographs, legal correspondence, hospital forms, and handwritten notes dated 36 years earlier. Ethan stared silently at one particular document while color slowly drained from his face. "William Harrison is not listed as my father," he said quietly. Nobody in the room moved. Harrison finally stepped closer into the light. Because he was never David's father. The storm outside seemed to pause for one impossible second. Ethan looked between us with confusion and disbelief twisting across his expression. "Then who was?" Harrison lowered his eyes briefly before answering. "Me." The silence that followed felt enormous. Ethan leaned back against the desk as though the room itself had shifted beneath him. I watched Harrison carefully. There was no triumph in his face, only exhaustion. "Victoria became pregnant before her marriage to William," he continued quietly. "William discovered the truth after David was born. But the Harrison name mattered more than honesty." Sophia looked stunned despite already knowing part of the story. "So William covered it up?" Harrison gave a faint nod. "And Thomas buried every record connected to me." Ethan stared at the old photographs spread across the desk. One showed a younger Harrison standing beside Victoria near the lake house behind the estate decades earlier. They looked happy, human, nothing like the cold stranger's time had turned them into. "My father does not know," Ethan whispered. "No," I said softly. "David spent his entire life carrying a name built on silence." Suddenly footsteps echoed sharply through the hallway outside the library. Fast, angry. The door swung open before anyone could react. Victoria stood there in a dark silk robe, her silver hair slightly disheveled for the first time in years. Her eyes locked immediately onto the open folder. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Victoria was not frightened because the secret existed. She was frightened because Harrison had finally decided to stop protecting her. Victoria closed the library door behind her with careful control, but the expression on her face revealed more fear than anger. For decades, she had mastered the art of looking untouchable inside Harrison Manor. Tonight, that mask looked dangerously close to breaking. Rain hammered against the tall windows while thunder rolled low across the Connecticut hills beyond the estate grounds. Ethan remained frozen beside the desk, his eyes fixed on the photographs scattered beneath the lamplight. Harrison stood perfectly still near the fireplace, his weathered hands resting against the back of a leather chair. You should not have opened those files, Victoria said quietly. Her voice remained smooth, but I noticed the tension in her jaw and the way she avoided looking directly at Harrison. Sophia slowly closed the folder halfway as though trying to contain the damage already spilling through the room. The truth was always going to surface eventually, she said carefully. Victoria gave a cold laugh. Truth is rarely useful in families like this. Ethan finally looked up. My father deserves to know. Victoria's expression softened for the briefest moment, and somehow that frightened me more than her cruelty ever had. Your father deserves peace, she replied. There is a difference. Harrison stepped forward slowly into the warm light beside the desk. You did not protect David, he said quietly. You protected the Harrison name. Victoria's eyes flashed toward him instantly. And you disappeared because you were too weak to fight for him. Silence swallowed the room. Harrison absorbed the insult without reaction, but I saw Ethan watching both of them carefully now, studying similarities that had remained invisible his entire life. The same sharp eyes, the same tired stillness when emotions became too heavy to show openly. William made the decision, Victoria continued. The board would have destroyed this family if the scandal became public. Harrison agreed to leave. Harrison looked toward the rain-covered windows before answering. I agreed because you promised David would never know. Victoria's composure cracked slightly then. He had a good life. He had a controlled life, Harrison replied. Ethan turned toward me slowly. Did my grandmother know? I lowered my eyes briefly before answering. I discovered the truth years later. Victoria looked at me sharply, and Eleanor stayed silent because she understood loyalty. I met her gaze calmly across the room. No, I stayed silent because I watched what happened to anyone who threatened this family. The grandfather clock downstairs chimed 1 in the morning. Somewhere deeper in the mansion, floorboards creaked softly as wind pushed against the old structure. Harrison moved closer to Ethan now, though not too close. Almost like a man afraid to reach for something he no longer had the right to claim. I came back because Thomas has been preparing new inheritance documents, he said quietly. And once they are signed, Isabel gains control of everything tied to the Harrison trust. Ethan frowned. Why would she care about me? Sophia answered before Harrison could. Because legally, if David is not William Harrison's biological son, the entire succession changes. The room fell silent again. Then Victoria whispered something so softly I almost did not hear it. That girl knew much more than she ever admitted. Harrison's eyes narrowed immediately. Lily. Victoria looked away toward the storm outside. And suddenly I understood that the secret destroying this family had never been buried completely. Someone else had already discovered it long before Ethan. By morning, the storm had passed, but Harrison Manor felt colder than the night before. Thin gray light filtered through the towering windows while fog settled across the frozen gardens outside. Nobody mentioned the library confrontation at breakfast. Wealthy families survive by pretending disasters have not already entered the room. Isabel sat beside David in an elegant cream dress, calmly reviewing financial documents while James poured coffee with his usual quiet precision. Ethan looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed from everything he had learned only hours earlier. Harrison remained absent from the table entirely, which somehow made his presence feel even heavier inside the house. Thomas will arrive at noon, Isabel announced smoothly while setting down her coffee cup. There are trust revisions everyone needs to sign before the board meeting next week. David rubbed his forehead tiredly. Do we really need to do this now? Isabel's expression softened instantly, but I had watched her long enough to recognize performance when I saw it. The company is unstable, David. Delays only create risk. Ethan glanced toward me briefly before speaking. What kind of revisions? Isabel smiled faintly. Adult matters, Ethan. Across the room, Victoria remained unusually silent near the fireplace, her attention drifting repeatedly toward the staircase as though expecting someone to appear at any moment. Fear changes people in subtle ways first. They become quieter, more watchful. James stepped beside me while refilling my cup and spoke so softly only I could hear him. Miss Lily arrived early this morning. My hand paused slightly against the tablecloth. Where is she? The guest house near the lake. Isabel looked up sharply the moment James mentioned Lily's name, though she recovered almost immediately. That tiny reaction told me more than words ever could. 3 hours later, I walked alone across the snowy stone path leading toward the guest house behind the frozen lake. The air smelled sharp and clean after the storm, but tension followed me like a second shadow. Lily opened the door before I knocked. She looked younger than I remembered, wrapped in an oversized cream sweater with nervousness written clearly across her face. "Mrs. Harrison," she said quietly, "I was wondering how long it would take before you came." Inside, the small guest house felt warmer than the mansion itself. Simpler too. No portraits, no chandeliers, no generations of secrets trapped inside the walls. Lily poured tea with trembling hands while avoiding eye contact. "Victoria told everyone I was unstable after I asked questions about David," she admitted softly. "Then Thomas paid me to leave." I sat across from her slowly. "What questions?" Lily swallowed hard. 5 years ago, William's old accountant contacted me by mistake. He thought I already knew about the inheritance records. Outside the window, wind brushed softly across the frozen lake. "And what did you discover?" Lily looked toward me carefully before answering. "David was never supposed to inherit Harrison Industries." The room felt suddenly smaller. Lily reached into a drawer beside the table and removed a faded envelope sealed with the Harrison crest. "William changed his final will 6 months before he died," she whispered. "But somebody replaced the original documents before the funeral." My chest tightened slowly. "Who?" Lily's eyes filled with quiet fear. "I think Isabel and Thomas worked together." At that exact moment, headlights appeared outside the guest house window. A black sedan moved slowly down the snowy driveway toward us. Lily went pale instantly. "They know I am here." The black sedan stopped outside the guest house just as snow began falling again in soft white sheets across the frozen lake. Lily stood motionless beside the window, clutching the envelope against her chest while fear drained the color from her face. I remained seated at the small wooden table, calmer than I expected to feel. There comes a moment in every long betrayal when fear simply becomes exhaustion. Headlights cut through the gray afternoon as the driver's door opened slowly. Thomas stepped out first in his dark wool coat, followed closely by Isabel beneath a black umbrella. Even from a distance, I could recognize the controlled urgency in the way she moved. "They should not have come together," Lily whispered nervously. "That means they are desperate." I rose carefully and adjusted my cardigan before taking the envelope from her trembling hands. "Then let them be desperate." By the time they reached the front porch, I had already opened the guest house door myself. Isabel froze for half a second when she saw me standing there instead of Lily alone. Thomas removed his glasses slowly, looking older than I had ever seen him. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "we were concerned about Miss Lily." "How thoughtful," I replied calmly. Snow gathered lightly across Isabel's blonde hair, while cold wind swept through the trees surrounding the lake. "You should not involve yourself in private legal matters," Isabel said smoothly, though the strain beneath her voice had finally become visible. I looked directly at her. "You stopped making this private when you started rewriting a dead man's legacy." Thomas stepped forward carefully. "The documents Lily possesses are incomplete and legally sensitive." Behind me, Lily remained silent near the fireplace while fear and relief battled across her face at the same time. I held the envelope firmly against my side. "William changed his will because he discovered the truth about David," I said quietly. "And both of you buried it." Isabel's composure cracked then, not loudly, but enough. "Do you have any idea what would happen if this became public?" she asked sharply. "The board would destroy David. The company would collapse. Everything William built would become a scandal." "No," I answered softly. "What destroyed this family was not the truth. It was the years spent hiding from it." Snow continued drifting silently around us, while the frozen lake behind the guest house disappeared beneath pale evening fog. For the first time since Harrison returned, Isabel looked uncertain instead of untouchable. Thomas lowered his eyes toward the ground before speaking again. "What do you intend to do?" I thought about Harrison sitting alone in the West Wing library, about Ethan carrying questions no young man should inherit, about David spending his entire life trying to become worthy of a name built on silence. Then I looked back at the mansion rising above the snowy hill like a monument to every secret this family had buried. "Nothing," I said quietly. Isabel blinked in surprise. "Nothing." I gave the faintest smile. "Tomorrow, the entire family will sit together at the dining room table one last time. And for the first time in 30 years, nobody will be able to control what happens next. Behind us, thunder rolled faintly through the distance again, while the lights inside Harrison Manor flickered against the falling snow like a house already beginning to remember every lie it had ever tried to forget.